Good evening. My name is Mike Haynie, and welcome to another edition of 60 Minutes in Black America. Today, we are interviewing Mr. Wes Moore, gubernatorial candidate for the state of Maryland, and we'll be right back. Good evening again. My name is Mike Haynie, and welcome back to 60 Minutes in Black America. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge our producer, our executive producer, Mr. Leon Thomas, who lost his mom on Friday, Miss Willie Thomas, who went on to glory, and the fact that he's still here working with us, and prayers and condolences for him and his family. As I mentioned at the top, we're interviewing Mr. Wesley Watende Omari Moore, who's a serious gubernatorial candidate here in the state of Maryland. In the history of this country, 246 years, there have been exactly two Black governors, Doug Wilder in Virginia and Mr. Patrick in Massachusetts. Can Mr. Moore be the third? What will it take of his campaign, and what does his platform look like in order for him to harness that great achievement? Let's bring Mr. Moore into the stream. Mr. Moore, welcome.
It's good to see you, good brother. How are you, Mr. Haynie?
I'm doing fantastic, man. And when you say that word, brother, it just enlightens me, man, as I bring greetings from our Grandmaster, Mr. Noel C. Osborne, the day that you were inducted into the Prince Hall Masonic Lodge. I was traveling, and the next day we were supposed to do our show so I could really welcome you. But unfortunately, our schedules couldn't mix. But here you are today, man, and this is what it's all about. Here you are today. So bringing greetings, and, so much appreciate you being part of us today, because you could be in a multitude of other places. I know a lot is going on. We got a lot to cover. But here you are with us today in 60 Minutes in Black America. So welcome. But I'd like to start with this because I've heard your story a number of times, your upbringing, the proudness of your family, and, how instrumental your family is. But I'd like to start with some of your background by showing a couple of pictures of some people that you know and talking about that before we get into the issues of the platform. So let's bring in this really special person that we have up first. Right? Who is this? Who is this person? You know who this is?
That's my godsend. That's my mom.
Is that your mom, Wes?
That's my mom. And I think about her because she's an immigrant to this country. She came from Jamaica, and I think about her life and her existence and her childhood where literally when she first came to this country, if you listen to her right now, she doesn't have a hint of a Jamaican accent. And part of that was because when she first came to this country, she literally had her classmates who would make fun of her so much and try to tell her that she sounded stupid, that she would listen to the radio to try to understand the American accent and to try to remove her Jamaican accent.
Wow.
And I think about that oftentimes because it's one of these things where, the things that we all should be, when we walk around and we exist in a space where I had to go through a process of learning in my own life and in my own journey, that I am never in a room that I don't belong in, that I really had to come with a greater appreciation of the fact that my job wasn't to make other people feel more comfortable, right? Your job is to all these things that make us, in this definition of freedom, is the fact that, all the things that make us us are things that we should celebrate, are things that we have nothing to be ashamed of, that these are all things that God has placed in our lives. And I think about my mom who, again, came to this country, experienced not just struggle, but tragedy at a very, very young age where, her husband, my father, died in front of me when I was young.
Because I want to show that. I was able to find a picture. I want to show your dad, man. His name was Wesley Moore, right?
Yes.
Wesley Moore, man. And your parents, one thing I discovered, educators, journalists, your mom's an entrepreneur, right? She's got her own business.
That's right.
And when your father passed, and I think you were 4 years old, you were up in New York, or no, you were in Maryland.
Yeah, I was down here. That's right.
You were down here in Maryland. Your mother, had to all of a sudden take you, and we'll talk about your grandparents in a bit as well. But let's talk about your dad for a minute, man. Father's Day is next week.
Yeah.
The importance of your dad. I've read a couple of your quotes and comments regarding your father. And what would you say to your father today based on where you are and what the upbringing has been that he has instilled and your mom's instilled in you to this point in life?
Oof, Mike, man. I actually, I don't think about the things I would say to him because I still do talk to him, because he still guides me. He's still protecting me. I feel deeply that there's no way that I could have had the life I have lived, seen and experienced the things that I experienced and still come out on the other side unless there were people who were helping to forge a way for me. And I believe that he's one of those people. Like I believe deeply that, and again, this is a person who, comes from a very close and a spiritual family, a union family, and someone who, even after he passed away, it was actually his union that paid for his funeral, that supported my mom when she needed it most. But someone who literally went to a hospital one day and his face was unshaven and his clothes were disheveled, and there were assumptions about whether or not he had insurance. And when my mom got to the hospital, they asked her questions like, "Is your husband prone to exaggeration?" And they asked him to leave the hospital with the instructions to go home and get some rest. And he died in front of me 5 hours later. And so not only does he serve as a very clear and distinct motivator for me, even as I make this gubernatorial run, because so many of the challenges that he saw, I devoted my life to public service because I was going to devote my life to fighting for people like my dad.
Wow, man, that's powerful. That is so powerful, man. And we're going to talk a bit more about your run for president. Your run for governor. I made that mistake, man. But we'll talk about that later. We'll straighten all that out a little bit later, man, because you look kind of presidential sitting up there. And so I know that there are some others that are significant in your life as well. And so let's show this next shot of, oh, no, that's Wes. Wes, where are you at? Is that
wait, hair?
Oh my goodness, look at that smile, man, that wonderful smile and that militaristic look. What kind of uniform is that, Wes? We were debating, we knew it wasn't Confederate, right? That's not no Confederate uniform, is it? Where did you get that uniform from, Wes?
So that uniform was from Valley Forge Military College.
Wow,
which is where I got sent to military school when I was young. And that year in particular, I was 19 years old. In that picture.
And you were 19 in that picture?
I was 19 in that picture. 19.
Now, how did you get to Valley Forge, Wes? How did you get there, man?
Well, my mother had been threatening me to send me away to military school ever since I was 8.
Were you that bad? Were you that bad a kid? What did you do, man? I heard some stories that you were in handcuffs or something. What did you do? Steal a Slurpee or something, man? What did you do? Because I can't imagine someone like you in a situation. It's unfathomable. Did you steal a Slurpee? What did you do?
I wish that's what it was. But I tell you, I feel like the reason that we call, they call these adverse childhood experiences, they call them ACEs, right? And the reason they call them ACEs and not ACE is because they're never singular, right? They're always compounded. They're always things that people are dealing with on a compounded nature. And so, when I first, that first time I felt handcuffs, it was when I was 11 years old, and it was for tagging. It was literally for spray painting on walls. But I think about it where I think I was just going through a lot of the same challenges that a lot of our kids are going through, right? Where we're trying to navigate this world and we're trying to understand this journey into manhood. and we're trying to listen to the experiences and the influences that are around us, and we're making decisions. Sometimes none of them all good decisions, but we're trying to make this thing work in a way that we know best at the moment.
Well, that's fantastic, Wes. And I got to tell you, man, we are so proud of you. And I'll tell the viewers, they know this is not an endorsement of Wes. I respect him highly. Don't get caught up in this mess. You know, this is not an endorsement, because we're a show that ensures that everyone. We've had Rashawn Baker, Peter Francho. We'll have Dan Cox next week. We've got Wes Moore. But I will not let anyone destroy this great man's reputation, because you're honorable, Wes, and I appreciate you so much, because you show, in spite of it, here you are today. So, and I want to shout out, I saw our former mayor of Baltimore, Jack Young, reach out and say hi to me and you, right?
Oh, hey, Mr. Mayor.
He's out there watching as well.
That's my guy. What's going on?
Absolutely, man. He's a fantastic guy. Enjoying his rest. But Wes, let's go to the next slide I got of you, man, and let's talk about that as well. You know, for a second, and that's you, because you have served in the military proudly. I think you were a captain. Talk about that period of time as well, man.
That was an extraordinary time in my life, because I remember I first joined the military when I was 17. And so, in fact, right around the time of that other picture was when I first joined the Army and first joined the military and became an officer. And I got to tell you, if you looked at that one kid in that other picture, that one kid never saw that other kid a few years later. Because at the time when I first joined, we weren't a nation at war, right? I was going to join the military, and they were going to, they're going to help pay for college, because college is really expensive. And I because of military school, I knew that I was good at leadership, and I wanted to lead soldiers and that kind of thing. And so, but I didn't know that war was on the horizon. And then a few years after I got commissioned, was 9/11. And I remember actually talking to a lot of my soldiers when I first went overseas, and to ask them, why did you join? And almost to a person, my soldiers, who were probably the age I was in that other picture, would say 9/11, 9/11, 9/11. And I always remember thinking to myself, what an extraordinary amount of respect I had for them, because when I first joined, going off to war wasn't something that was on the horizon. When they joined intentionally, knowing they, within months of finishing basic training, could be on their way overseas. And so that picture, when I was in Afghanistan, I was a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division, and I led paratroopers over in Afghanistan. So
you weren't on the back line, making plans, etc. You were a paratrooper. You were out for 82nd Airborne. What's that? Fort Jackson? Where's that at?
That's Fort Bragg.
Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So that was the real deal, right? Leading men and women in war. Time,
oh yeah. Right? No, we were. I am combat tested.
Wow, man, that is powerful, man. What a testament to your upbringing, from your mom to putting you in that militaristic institution, Valley Forge, to a point of you going overseas, leading our men and women, and here you are today. So the next slide, Wes, you came out of that. You have a wonderful, wonderful family, wife. Your wife. Introduce us to your family. Your wife Dawn and your two children.
Yes. So my family is my everything. That's my everything. And so my wife of 15 years now, Dawn, who actually was born and spent a lot of her life in New York, and came down here for College Park. Went to college in College Park. And never
graduate of University of Maryland, right? Graduate of University of Maryland State, and met you, right?
That's right. She's a Terp through and through, and she came down to Maryland for college, and she never left. And she really is. I mean, she's my anchor. I always say that my daughter is my heart, my son is my soul, and my wife is my everything. And,
wow, that's powerful, man. That is powerful. And your wife is not. She's a very astute, smart business person herself, right?
Right. That's right.
Probably. I'm not even gonna say equally. I think from what I've seen, she's better than you, man. So the state of
Yeah.
Maryland could potentially get two extraordinary people. And this is what's so important about doing these interviews instead of going right to the issues, because we're going to get to the issues. It's good to understand and know, not that people couldn't have picked up. And we talked about in February, we signing the book that I bought when you first brought it out. My mother has my hard copy, right? So I got to get that to you before I can't see you anymore. But the book, The Other Wes Moore, I encourage you. And Wes, you've written how many books?
5 books now.
You've written 5 books. Well, I've been good to read 1.5, man. But you got to read Wes's book to understand Wes. Where Wes has been, his upbringing, his thinking, and how he's got to this point. Because as I mentioned before, Wes, very, very proud of you, as I'm sure many people in this country are. But here it's a new day. You decide to run for governor, and so, there's a new day, new issue, different seriousness in terms of the issues. And so the next slide we go to is one about a foundation that I was familiar with called Bridge EDU.
That's right. Right?
Talk a little bit about that, why you started it, where it was based, Wes.
Yeah, so it was, and I love that picture you see there on the left. It's the president of, at that time, the president of Coppin, who was one of our first educational partners, and also, and then to my left and right over there, you see some of our Bridge EDU scholars. And, I really started this platform in Baltimore, in Maryland, because of the high chance for students who were entering school, how many of them weren't completing. So 50% of students who are the first in their family to start school, or first generation students start school, they won't finish their freshman year.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Their freshman year.
Oh, yeah. We're going to tell the viewers about that specifically, because you speak to that very seriously, man. But, your impetus to start that was to try to influence the process of education post high school for our students.
That's right.
Gotcha.
That we want for our students to be able to find the pathway to their own joy and their own glory. And when we realized that part of the reason that students were having difficulty with that transition wasn't just about tuition, right? If you're not also addressing things like transportation, food insecurity, housing insecurity, childcare, mental health, you're going to repeatedly miss the point. And so we really built out this platform that was helping to focus on giving students the holistic support that they were going to need in order to have long-term economic success for them and their families. That was the origin of Bridge EDU. And we're really proud of the fact that, in its lifetime, we ended up serving over 600 students and helping over 600 students, helping to make it to and through college. And so we're really proud of the success that we were able to build, the stories that we were able to help foster, because it made our city and it made our state better.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt about that, because there was a number of people who believed in you. I know that you raised significant money to help young people. And in spite of what people may have heard, that this isn't a failed business. This is a business or an opportunity that someone picked up on, right?
That's right.
Someone bought, and they're carrying on the mission now in a bigger context. Is that accurate, Wes? This business isn't going to fall off, right?
No, that's 100% accurate. And we're thankful when you look at the situation that that over 80% of Black-owned businesses will fail within the first 12 months. When you look at the stats that we have around Black-owned businesses and what happens with Black entrepreneurs, when you look at the fact that even just over the last year that we've had billions of dollars invested in venture capital for businesses in the state of Maryland, and less than 1% of that went to, or less than 2% of that went to organizations started by African Americans. Wow. So we've got a real problem when it comes to creating mechanisms of growth, mechanisms of success for Black-owned businesses within our society. And I'm proud of the fact that not only did we build one that turned to success, that had a successful exit had a successful exit where you had another company, a larger company, who says, we're impressed with what they've done. We're going to take it on. We're going to scale its impacts and scale its results. And then so the work then was able to continue. I'm incredibly proud of the fact that I'm one of the few Black entrepreneurs that's actually led an organization from origin, idea to growth and scale and exit. That doesn't happen often enough in our communities. And part of the thing I want to do is ensure that we can watch more success stories like that.
Absolutely, man. There's no doubt about that. And it's important that people hear that, because one of the points in doing this is allowing people to clear up the facts. Because I read something out there where someone said a failed bid. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And so here you hear from the man that he sold his business. You know what I'm saying? And he sold it for the benefit of young people to scale it and grow it to even greater heights, man. So kudos to you, Wes. And then you left there and you went somewhere else. You went to a place called Robinhood, not the company, the foundation, right? You went to Robinhood Foundation because when people were making all that money, Wes, and it was going crazy, they're like, man, thank you, Wes. Thank you, Wes. I even stupidly, Wes, to tell you the truth, I hope don't tell nobody. Oh, that's right. I'm telling people now. I even said, Dad, Wes, thank you so much, man. But, you know, then I learned. It was only a minute, though, only a minute, you know, but you did some real good at Robinhood Foundation. Talk about that for a second, Wes, in terms of some of the successes, the opportunities when you were at Robinhood.
Yeah, so Robinhood, the organization I ran, to your point, not the trading app. Who I was responsible for that, but the organization I ran is one of the largest poverty fighting organizations in this country. Where just in my time as CEO, we have raised and allocated over $650 million. Worked with over 1,600 organizations where we find what works, fund it, and scale it. Right, and it's one of the largest and most complex organizations of its kind in this country. And it was a remarkable experience because, you know, as a leader, I am data driven and heart led. Right. I admit I wear my heart on my sleeve, but data matters. And when we worked across, whether we were investing in housing, transportation, education, early childhood, criminal justice reform, we were finding the things that were working and actually then focusing on helping them to scale to serve more people. And we started working with policy elements. And so I was proud of the fact that I was able to work with, work on issues like adjustments to the child tax credit. So we could give more people access to a child tax credit and significantly cutting the child poverty rate. Able to work on things like ensuring that we can close the racial wealth gap and working across sectors in order to do that. From everyone from the CEO of Goldman Sachs to the CEO of Harbor Bank, from the CEO of Starbucks to the CEO of the ACLU, to close the racial wealth gap. And to be able to work with even lawmakers here in Maryland, people like Senator Antonio Hayes and others on fair appraisal value for historically redlined neighborhoods, because one of the greatest wealth thefts that we have seen in our society has been unfair appraisal values. So it was a moment to really identify about what works. How do you bring that to scale? How do you work across sectors in order to achieve the kind of big changes that were going to be necessary for our society?
Wow, Wes, that's powerful, man. When you look at your life up to this point, the point from Miss Moore, Joy, right? All the way through Valley Forge to your dad, you know, to Afghanistan, to your foundation, Bridge EDU, to Robinhood. You know, people would say, man, that's on the path to presidential. You talk about Johns Hopkins, being a fellow. I mean, you talk about some significant things in addition to, as you mentioned earlier, the challenges of your life, particularly at that very vulnerable age. You mentioned 11, you mentioned AIDS, and how many of our young people don't have their parents in their life to rear them, even though your dad was in there briefly. He's still the influence, and others in terms of that village, man. So kudos to you to that point. Now we're about to get really, really, really into it, you know, because I think the next slide is another person's pretty significant in your life right now, right? So this is your running mate, right? Aruna Miller, right? Your running mate. Talk about her for a second, and then we're going to begin to get into the issues, Wes, because she's pretty significant right now, right?
She is, and she's spectacular. Aruna is a seasoned and a deeply respected legislator out of former delegate out of Montgomery County, or she calls it the Fighting 15th, out of District 15 down in Montgomery County. She is a civil and a transportation engineer by training. She's also a former member of the Ways and Means and the Appropriations Committee. And, I took that process very seriously when I was deciding who I wanted to be my running mate. And when people say, well, what were you looking for? What were some of the gating criteria? And I said, my gating criteria was simple. If something were to happen to me, who is the person that I would trust to lead the state and lead a state that my children were growing up in, right? And Aruna is someone who has not just spent her life fighting for important pieces of legislation around everything from helping the survivors of domestic violence to ensuring that all of our children could have access to STEM education and computer science education to prepare them for the jobs of now and for the jobs of the future, to ensuring that we can get rid of regulatory red tape for our small businesses and making Maryland more competitive for our small businesses and our minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. She's also someone who is a dear friend, and I got to tell you, Michael, I was thinking about it when Aruna's mom and my mom were actually sitting next to each other, and I was talking to a crowd. This is probably about 4 months ago, and I paused and I acknowledged both of them, and I said to the crowd, I told them who they both were, and then I said, these two women immigrated to this country. Aruna's mom from India, my mom from Jamaica. And when they came to this country, they came with a hope, not just for themselves, but for their children or for their future families. And I told the crowd, and with your help, they're going to be sitting together again in Annapolis, except they'll be sitting together in Annapolis in January at the inauguration of their two children to become the governor and the lieutenant governor of a state that helped to welcome them.
I hear you, Mr. Moore. I hear you and appreciate that comment. And we're going to get to the platforms on education, social justice, environment in a minute. But I want to let the producers know we're going to go right to our 30-second halfway point now so that when we jump in, we don't have to interrupt Mr. Moore, if you don't mind. We're going to go right to the halfway point now. And it's 6:27. You're watching 60 Minutes in Black America on the BlackUSA.news network, a network that was conceived by Mr. Donnie Glover for the hope of bringing communities around this country together so we can collaborate on information, share good things. As we're sharing today, Mr. Wes Moore, we have gubernatorial candidates around the country, particularly when you look at Georgia. Stacey Abrams is a serious gubernatorial candidate. We have one in the state of Wisconsin that's running, as well as New York City and Massachusetts. But Mr. Moore and Ms. Abrams are considered very serious candidates for governors. But how do we vet? How do we see? How do we know what to look for unless we're able to look at shows like this that are broadcast in Oakland, in Los Angeles, California, in Atlanta, Georgia, Miami, Florida, Chicago, Illinois, Boston, Massachusetts, Harlem, New York, Washington, D.C., for the ability to see how we're doing it in other communities. So next week is Father's Day, and we have a special Father's Day show with 4 dads out of our community to show the goodness in our communities, dispelling the myths that we hear about, absentee families and dads that don't have responsibility. We have some awesome dads, more so than not, in our communities. And we need to show this on an ongoing, regular basis. And next week we'll do that at 60 Minutes on 60 Minutes in Black America. But let's bring Mr. Moore back to the stream so we can get to it, man. We can start to talk about the issues, revolving around education. Mr. Moore, as you mentioned, you're very serious. Not you say, polls say you're a very serious candidate. Matter of fact, the latest poll has you moving like a freight train. It is unbelievable, the momentum that your campaign has gained. You're number 2, I believe, behind Mr. Francho. Sure. And it looks like that gap is narrowing quite a bit. And we're going to talk about why when we go to the issues. But before we get to education, which I'd like to be the first platform of yours we talk about, I'd like to play this quick 45-second clip.
Right. And so when you have a situation, so let's take education, for example, and I'll just tell you just a simple reference from Baltimore. 5,000 kids will graduate from high school every year in Baltimore. 500 of them are prepared for college or careers when they walk across the graduation stage. 10%. So the 90% of kids, and these are the ones that graduate, even for the ones that move on to higher education, they're then having to take developmental coursework when they move on to college. The challenge of developmental coursework when you move on to higher education is this, is that it costs exactly the same, except you're getting no credit for it. So you have students who will then take whole batteries of developmental coursework, pay the same amount, and at the end of the year, after using all their freshman tuition and using aid or whatever it is to get them freshman tuition, will then have 6 or 3 or no credits to their name. Chances are that student will never graduate from college because if nothing else, their financial aid will run out, right?
Wow. So, Mr. Moore, that's kind of post high school to a degree, although it's the preparation.
That's right.
Because in Baltimore City, that in the stats seem to be about 95% need remedial, right? 95% need remedial. There's a statistic in Baltimore City as an example, and this is in urban centers across America. So Baltimore is not unique to what you see in urban education centers across America, be it, Prince George's County, Dorchester here in the state, and we'll get to them later. But 95% need remedial. In Baltimore City, we have close to 58% of our graduating seniors, right? The ones that get a diploma that can't read above the 4th grade level, right? So there's an issue. So I want to hear about education as a platform of yours and how you see change and what do we get educationally in Prince George's, Baltimore City, Dorchester County, Maryland, if we get Wes Moore as governor as far as education.
Yeah, I mean, what we have right now, Haynie, is this is so functionally unfair. It's functionally unfair to our students. It's functionally unfair to our families, but also what we're even asking our educators to deal with is functionally unfair. I mean, right now, we still have schools in Baltimore where children, when it gets over 90 degrees, we have to stop school. And they're sending kids home because we do not have proper air conditioning. We have schools around the state where children cannot drink from the water fountains because of lead, even though we've known lead is a neurotoxin for over a century inside of this country. But we've just been amazingly colored and class coded in the way that we dealt with it, where we have a situation that children are being predestined to have an understanding of what it is that we hope that they will do, where we are literally products of our expectations. And the expectations that we're stating to our families are not high. And so when you think about what's going to happen in our administration, we are going to, and I'm proud of the fact, for example, that I worked on an initiative called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which was a groundbreaking piece of legislation that ensured that we were going to get fair and proper funding for our schools, for everything from 21st century schools to ensuring that every child is going to have access to free pre-K, every child in need. That we are going to create pipelines for educators of color inside of classrooms, because that does matter to our children, particularly in a situation where, according to the last census numbers, over 50% of all students in our public schools in our state are children of color. So we have to make sure we have educators that are actually reflecting that we are going to be a state that is going to invest in apprenticeship programs and trade programs and give students a proper pathway from an earlier age, that if they want to go on to become a carpenter or an iron worker or a pipe fitter or work in HVAC, that there's going to be pathways for their long-term economic success as well. But we have got to start moving and investing in education like we mean it. And moving and investing in education as if that is going to be the foundation for all of our long-term growth and success, because it is. And I'm proud of the fact that our campaign was the one that received the endorsement of Maryland educators. The teachers endorsed our campaign over any other campaign because they knew that we were going to be the kind of leader and partner that they were going to look to build a 21st century education system that our children can thrive in.
Let's look at Baltimore City and Prince George's County, predominantly Black demographics, and those two in the city and the county, as you see, be it in Chicago or Birmingham or Montgomery. You see this in inner city public schools, right? So you were referencing, I believe, the Kerwin report,
Yep.
which I believe said something about $3.8 billion per year additional to fund this blueprint, right, plan for the state. But these three jurisdictional school systems have had decades of atrocity and poor education systems, right?
That's right.
Is the money the issue? But they also are the three highest per student when it comes to money. So we pay more in Maryland. Prince George's and Baltimore 1-2 on a per student funding basis. Is money the issue, Mr. Moore?
Yeah. Well, the proper targeting of money is part of the issue. Now, one of the reasons that I'm excited about what we're going to be able to do, and we are going to make sure that we are going to fully fund the blueprint, but in partnership, we're going to make sure that we implement it. And that does become important. We're not going to retreat from that. We can't. This is too important. But now it's not just about, oh, we need to put more money or we need to write a blank check. I have never believed in that, and I never will. I'm proud of the fact that I'm the only candidate in this race who's actually ever run a business where I say I sign not just the back of checks, but the front of them. So I get every dollar needs to be accountable. The organization that I led, we made sure that every single dollar we could be transparent and accountable as to where it went and what was the societal ROI. And the reason that we have this accountability board for the blueprint is that's exactly the standard that our administration is going to set. We need proper accountability and we need transparency. Now, the thing we also have to understand, though, is this, that when you're dealing with a population where poverty becomes such a huge part of the conversation, for example, in Baltimore City, Baltimore City has double the poverty rate than the entire state of Maryland. Right now in Baltimore City, when you have situations where our children, when people say, well, how does poverty show itself? Right, does it show itself in education? Does it show itself in housing? Or how do we do just transportation? My answer is simple. It's yes. Because poverty doesn't pick and choose how it shows itself. It shows itself in the air you breathe. It shows itself in the water you drink. It shows itself in the transportation assets you have or don't have. It shows itself in the schools you attend. It shows itself in how you're policed. It shows itself in every single way. And so do we have to make sure that we have fair and equitable funding for our schools? Yes. Do we have to ensure that fair and equitable funding is transparent? And this is not just about writing more checks. Yes. But is it also about making sure that all of our educators and paraeducators, all of our parents, and all of our children understand that they have a partner in the second floor in Annapolis and someone who's going to take this personally, that we are preparing our children for the world that they are going to inherit? The answer to that is yes as well.
Well, you talked about early childhood education, because I'm gonna stay on this for a minute, because we are desperate in this state, particularly in communities of color, and so frustrated with the educational systems that we got to hold feet to the fire with these politicians relative to not just saying what they're going to do, but showing real tangible actionable plan in terms of what they're going to do. So you talk about early childhood education, as a pathway, funding it, making sure that is something accessible to all people. But what is it that you can commit and promise, if it's one thing to the people of the state of Maryland, particularly those two jurisdictions, what is one thing that you can commit to that they can believe that will begin to change the dynamics of how we're educating our young people in our inner cities?
I love it. And I gotta tell you, Haynie, I love it, because exactly what you just said is part of the reason why I'm in this race, because I am tired. I'm tired of hearing these same promises. I'm tired of hearing these same folks who are just talking about the things that they are going to do, and then I won't hear from them, and then no one hears them for another 4 years. Where it's like we have people right now who are asking us for our support and claiming that they can fix a problem, and they're not acknowledging that their fingerprints are all over the problem that needs fixing, right? That they've been responsible for that. And so I tell people, I've been a public servant for my whole life. I just haven't been a politician. And so we know that when we enter into this right now, we're going to do the things that work. And we're going to do the things that I have a history of working on. So for example, when we're talking about things, you mentioned early childhood, the reason that I say that we're going to ensure that every child, that we're going to have free pre-K for every child in the state of Maryland who's in need, it's not because it sounds good. It's because the data shows that 80% of brain development happens in a child by the time that child is 5 years old. So why we have children starting school at 5 makes absolutely no sense. We've got to start earlier. And we have to ensure we can fix, at the same time, fix a broken childcare system. We've had over 850 childcare centers closed since COVID. We right now have a childcare program and a childcare platform in the state of Maryland where childcare can cost as much as in-state college tuition. We are never going to be able to compete. We're never going to be able to create a proper pathway if we have children who are starting late, who are not getting the supports they need early, especially when you know that reading by third grade level is a key barometer for many of our students. There's 3 reasons why students are not reading at a third grade level. One is chronic absence, so missing 30% or more of the school year. The second reason is summer learning loss. And the third reason is students who are entering school unprepared. We can fix that as a state if we're intentional. And that's what we have to do within our administration.
Well, let me ask you something, Mr. Moore, because I'm gonna hammer home on this for another 30 seconds.
I love it.
Right? So if you were governor today, and if you are as upset as people are about the money, so we're talking about $3.8 billion more annually with Kerwin over the next 10 years, in addition to the money we're getting now, when you're not seeing the results in the counties and city that you're not seeing it, are you willing to take over as the state governor that education system? Would you take over Baltimore today based on the 20 years of consistently being in the bottom 2, although the state did have control of education in Baltimore for a number of years, I believe, after Kurt Smoke left? Would you take over education in these counties and just put it underneath yourself and force results that way? Would that be a tool of yours?
Yeah, and in fact, if you look at the current structure that exists right now, the state still has a special relationship with the city of Baltimore that it does not have with other
financially.
Yes.
Yeah, financially, because if you look at it from a results-driven standpoint, you said you're a data guy, right?
That's right.
If you're a data guy, somebody should have said, well, we need triage or we need something.
That's right.
We are giving diploma to kids that can't read above the 4th grade level. We wonder why businesses aren't attracted, because our education system can't support the type of technological structure that businesses, Amazon, IE, and other technological companies, they look at our education system, and we're talking about growing business. So I know you're looking at it in totality, but are we at a crisis where you're going to take over?
We've been in a crisis, and think about this. Take a look at what you just said, where we have, right now in the state of Maryland, we have 2 available jobs for every person that's filing for unemployment. Right? And people say, well, how does that make sense? It makes sense because the jobs we have on board right now, we do not have people who are qualified for them. They don't have the educational background or attainments to actually make them competitive for the jobs that are actually available. We've been past a crisis situation. So yes, what we need to have is a governor who's actually going to be a partner inside of this work. A governor who's going to move in partnership with local leaders and local jurisdictions and educators and our school leaders, and to be able to say, failure is not an alternative and it is not an option. We have got to pull out all the stops and nothing is off of a table in order to ensure that our children can start early, can get the proper supports that they need, that we are going to invest in things like community schools. And community schools, they work because it's not just about curriculum, but if we're also now focusing on things like dental care and eye care and mental health and all the other reasons why we have students who are truant, then we're always going to repeatedly miss the point. But we have to be able to focus on it on a holistic basis, because if we think it's just about, we have to adjust curriculum, we have children who are starving, right? We have children who cannot see the school board because they don't have proper eye care. We have in Baltimore City, the children of Baltimore City have double the asthma rate of anywhere else in the state. That's environmental injustice. That's environmental injustice. And so we have to be able to actually move in partnership, take it personally, and not just simply have a chief executive who's going to wag his finger at us and tell us to do better.
Wow.
And
wow.
I say as a Baltimorean, I take that very personally.
And you know what we both do, and I am sweating this shirt out because I've gotten so passionate as you have
Yes.
about this. And so we got to move on to something, because if not, man, we're going to be hooping and hollering here, but it's all good because it's
we can do an hour just on education.
Yeah,
but it's
exactly.
It's that important.
Exactly.
That important.
And I encourage our viewer to go up and get Mr. Moore's, I think it's a 15-page white paper on education that's detailed in terms of the areas that he cover, because that's what, if he's elected, we have to hold him accountable to.
That's right.
Because we have to hold him accountable. You know, we can have all these great conversations, but when the rubber meets the road, change is change, change is real, and we're talking about lives, okay? Yes. So let's move on to something a little bit, you know, less emotional for me. Let's talk about crabs. You like crabs? let's talk environment. Let's talk environment. And let's talk crabs. Let's talk the Chesapeake Bay. Yeah. Let's talk energy. And you talk about the fact that Baltimore City gets 7 degrees hotter than any other place in the state. So let's talk environment. And my first question is kind of little facetious but true, because the industry of the Chesapeake Bay is so important to this state. And we know that this year there's a tremendous shortage on crabs in our state because of the Chesapeake Bay and some of the harvesting practices, et cetera. There was talk of a mandate of not harvesting crabs from the bay for a 1-year period to restore that. And so our people can relate to that. I can't get no crabs. What are you talking about? What do you think, Mr. Moore, the issue is, and would you support a mandate to replenish and restore that treasure from the Chesapeake Bay before we get into energy?
Yeah, no. So this actually is an issue that I'm passionate about too. But I'm passionate about not just because I love my crabs. This is a major economic engine for our state. And it matters when we look at the report, though, to the point you mentioned, Michael, that was recently released, showing that this is the lowest population of both male and female crabs that we have seen coming out of the bay. And people say, well, why does that matter? It doesn't just matter because now it's tougher for people to get crabs in their cookouts, right? It's what it says about the overall health of the bay. It's what it says about the entire ecological ecosystem that exists there. And it's what it says about so many economies that are then going to be impacted. We can't forget how the environment is impacting all of us. Not to mention the fact that we've lost over $10 billion over the past decade because of climate change. And that's everything from dealing with these issues of extreme heat, dealing with the fact that we do not have a resilient infrastructure, that we have parts of Maryland. 70% of Maryland is connected to low-lying water areas. And when you consider the fact that we have areas like Ellicott City that are now seeing 100-year storms every 5 years, right? So we've got a crisis on our hands. And so the reason that you see also in our plan, you talk about how long and lengthy and how detailed our plan is for education. We're kind of like that with every policy issue. I believe deeply in about we need to get into the details of policy. And so if you look at our environmental plan on wesmore.com, we actually show exactly why we are moving so aggressively to be able to address these issues like the health of the bay, like the environment, because this has significant economic implications as well as moral implications for the fact that in Maryland, we've got to take the environment, we've got to take the bay seriously. We need to fully fund the Bay Restoration Fund. We need to be better partners with our regional alliances, but this is a now issue. It is not a future issue. We are seeing the implications right now.
So final question on that, because like you said, that is the second most detailed plan. And I got to tell the production team, I see questions in the chat. They are booming. So we may have to get these to Mr. Moore, or maybe
we'll do a part 2. I'm excited for this.
We have to do a part 2. Is that okay, Mr. Moore? Okay, so maybe just before you guys vote on the 19th, Mr. Moore may come back and we address this, because I see a bunch of questions in there we can't get to. But Mr. Moore, let me ask you a question. Windmills off Ocean City, I was out in California, they had thousands of windmills to subsidize energy out there. Yep. There was talk of putting windmills in the Chesapeake Bay, in the Atlantic Ocean, rather, to subsidize or to bring in energy, electric energy into the state of Maryland. Do you support that? I know the folks in the Eastern Shore have an issue with that. Do you support having windmills by the thousands out there in the Atlantic Ocean?
Yeah, no, and I do understand that it's a very personal and it's an emotional issue for a lot of people. And when we talked about the progress that's been made because of the the Chesapeake clean water blueprint, that has all that's been done, and we have to be able to do it because it helps, because it has to be done within partnership. And solar and wind technology are going to be part of our larger energy future. Right. So when we think about, when you look at the comprehensive plan that we pulled together, it sets very aggressive targets that says we're going to have 100% clean energy by 2035, that we are going to have net zero emissions by 2045, that we're going to move our state to be an exporter of clean energy and not just an importer of clean energy, that we are going to leverage the billions of dollars of incoming federal funds to be able to grow our solar installations, supercharging our wind industry, to invest in battery storage. And we're going to do that not just because it's important for the environment. We're going to do that not just because it's important to be able to take seriously the fact that we've got one planet and we need to lead on being able to preserve that planet. But it's also because of the economic implications. Because when we're talking about doing things like investing in solar and wind technologies, when we're talking about things like investing in battery storage, that's a chance for us to have true partnerships with our HBCUs. That's a chance for us to have real partnership with our entrepreneurs, both our MBEs and our WBEs and our small businesses here in the state of Maryland. This could be a major economic driver to be able to condense the wealth gap, to increase GDP within our state. And we've got to move, and we've got to take that seriously.
Well, that's interesting you say that. I was down with a entrepreneur in the state of Maryland, in Baltimore, specifically a guy named James Hamlin with the Avenue Bakery, who says he knows you. You were down there. You taste this product.
That's one of my favorite spots.
Absolutely, man. Unbelievable. But his plan, he has worked with that bakery to be a means to an end of redeveloping economically that demographic area, right? And he's got a fantastic plan for economic development centered around the Royal Theater, because that was one of the main theaters back in the day in the country.
That's right.
And so what does Black development look like? And he's doing well down there. It's a tourist destination in that area. But let's get to, because we're down to the last 7 minutes, social justice. And I'm going to start off with a question for you. Is marijuana a gateway drug?
No. When what we're about to see right now with and how our state is going to vote on this, and the state's going to vote in November as to where it's going to go, right? And I do believe the state is going to vote to have recreational cannabis. And the thing that I know is that as we roll it out and as we implement it, there are a couple different things that we're going to have to think about when it comes to cannabis. One, we have to address the social justice issues around this. You cannot talk about the benefits of legalization unless we also deal with the consequences of criminalization, and the consequences that have been massive detriments to our community. And so that means things like automatic expungement of records. That means lifting the caps that we have on people who have cannabis convictions to be able to participate in the cannabis industry, right? So we're going to have to move aggressively on that and be much more thoughtful, frankly, than we were during the medical rollout. The other piece, though, this is the economic piece. This is the fact that we have in this state an 8-to-1 racial wealth gap, and that's not because one group is working 8 times harder.
Is that the 70? So Black families make 71 cents to the dollar that white families make. Is that a data statistic? Because like you said, you're data driven. Is that true?
That is true. That is true. But here's the thing. That's an income gap.
That's income.
I'm talking about a wealth gap. And those are two different things. And we need to start centering ourselves not just on rises in income, but rising in wealth. The North Star for our campaign is very clear. We want to create pathways for work, wages, and wealth. And what I mean by wealth is just simply this. It's a chance to own more than you owe. It's a chance to pass something off to your children besides debts. That's what I mean when I'm talking about wealth. And so we look at this type of opportunity. The state of Maryland has these new opportunities that are now coming on board and quickly, whether we're talking about cannabis or sports betting or crypto. We have all these new industries. The problem is that with the way these industries historically are rolled out, they don't decrease the wealth gap. They're actually increasing the wealth gap. And we've seen that play itself out within the state of Maryland. We have got to drive these new industries and tailor and train these new industries that they can be things that can be done to be able to focus on creating pathways and opportunities for families, and particularly families that historically have been left out of the conversation. That we're going to invest in not just, how we're talking about when it comes to cannabis, not just how we're talking about the growers, but it's the para, it's all the other elements of this new industry that are getting brought up. But frankly, we've done a horrible job of actually being able to force diversification in terms of how the equity is going to work. And so these are things that we are got to be deliberate about, and we need to be serious about it. Because if we miss this opportunity to be able to focus on work and wages and wealth, and particularly how these new industries are going to bring us to that point, then we're going to find ourselves saying that, oh, aren't we glad that we did record expungement while the wealth gap exploded?
Wow, that's powerful. So you're right. Let's talk about for a second, because we're winding down. I tell you, man, this should have been a 2-hour conversation, but I just respect your time. But let's talk about what you plan in terms of your investment on reentry, recidivism rate, because crime is an issue in our cities. We're not going to dominate because there's so much we can do, to offset that from an education perspective. And as you mentioned, wealth gap perspective, but recidivism and crime and justice. What are your thoughts on that?
We have a criminal justice system in this state that every crime, every sentence is a life sentence. And the reason we've set that up, and it's intentional. Do not let anyone confuse you on this. That when you ask people to come back home, and we're saying, yes, you can come back home, welcome home, but remember, you can't live in public housing, even if your family's there. Welcome home, but remember, there's many jobs that you cannot even apply for anymore. Welcome home, but even if you apply to college and you get accepted, there's a whole lot of grants that you are not qualified for. But welcome home. And then we wonder why we have such a high recidivism rate here in the state of Maryland, because we have people who are coming back home to environments that are not welcoming for their long-term success. And so when you consider the fact that 95% of people who are incarcerated are coming home, only 5% are there for life or long-term sentences. We've got to do a better job of both preparing our society for their reentry and preparing the individuals for their reentry. And that includes everything from job training programs and job reskilling programs. That includes things like resume and title building platforms to be able to get people employed when they come back home. That includes removing these arbitrary barriers that we have for people about where they can live and where they can work and how they can move around. And it means also for people who are moving back into our systems, back into our societies, that we've got to make second chances mean something. Because right now, we're very clear that we don't mean it.
Wow, Mr. Moore, this has been an awesome interview. I'm very respectful for your time. Can you give me like a minute and a half extra so that I can close you out and let you close out properly? But before we close out, Mr. Moore, I'd like to bring on and just show quickly some faces that are production team. These are young people, because I know you believe in young people who are college students, right? Who help with the production team, Jeremiah and Jasmine. Say hi to Mr. Moore.
Hey guys, how y'all doing? Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for lifting us up.
Yeah,
Thank you for lifting us up.
Yes, my honor.
Yeah, they're producing this show, Mr. Moore, and I'd like to bring on Jay and Leon, their mentors, who are our production executive producers, Leon and Jay, thank you so much again for this awesome team.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Mr. Moore won't want to go to CNN no more. He's coming right back here, man.
I'm coming right back here. Listen, this is family. I appreciate y'all. I appreciate, and by the way, and especially to all the students, God bless you. God bless you for everything you're doing. Like, you are making us all better, and we are all floating with you right now. So I am grateful, and I'm serious. I'm excited to get back. I'm excited to get back.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moore. Thank you very much, you guys. And Mr. Moore, before you go, I want to give you 2 minutes, if it's okay, to wrap up and tell us whatever you want to tell after I've just kind of banged all these questions with you. You got 2 minutes, man. Whatever you want to say, whatever you want to tell our viewers, man, which are substantial out there.
Bless you, Mike, and thank you for your leadership. And the thing that I would just tell people is, you know, that when I think about why I'm running and why I'm in this race, you know, I first joined the military, you know, when I was 17 years old, and we first learned something. We learned a mantra they asked us to live by, and I did. And that mantra was just this: leave no one behind, ever. If you get one of my people, I would send a battalion in to go get them if I have to. We don't leave people behind. Well, come January, that's going to be a new mission for the state of Maryland. We are going to be a state that is going to grow. We are going to be a state that is going to build. We are going to be a state that is going to compete. We are going to be a state that's going to win. But we're going to win in a way that everybody is going to cheer and not just some. And I'm proud of the fact that I'm a Baltimorean. I'm proud of the fact that I come from a long line of preachers and teachers. I'm proud of the fact that I come from a long line of survivors. And I know that in this moment, we've got a chance to be bold. We've got a chance to be big. We've got a chance to get big things done. But in order to do it, I'm going to need your help. And so I very humbly ask you for your support. Please go to wesmoore.com and you can learn more about our platform. But with your help and with your support, we are going to win. And not just an election. I'm talking about we're going to win the next decade for all of our children.
Great. Mr. Moore, thank you so much again for being here. And as I mentioned at the top of the hour, there's a setup for something big. Thanks to all the viewers for viewing in this week. We'll see you again next week, same time, 6 p.m. on 60 Minutes in Black America. Thanks again, Mr. Moore. Everyone have a great week.
God bless.